Hello students, myself Suresh VS. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to start a new lesson. The title of the lesson is The Enemy, written by Pearl Striker Buck. Pearl S. Buck. She was born on January 26, 1892 and died on March 6, 1973. She is an American writer and novelist. She had won the greatest award of America, that is Pulitzer Prize in 1932 for her book The Good Earth. And also she achieved Nobel Prize in Literature in 1938 for her true description of peasant life in China and for her biographical masterpiece. You see, what is the theme of the lesson, The Enemy? The theme, universal human values, which must be important than any narrow concession like in nationalism. So, human values, that is universal human values, are more important than any other narrow concept like nationalism. That is the central idea of this lesson. Dear students, let us go through the lesson. It is the time of the World War. Here it's talking about World War II. So the story has been written in the background of World War II. An American prisoner of war is washed ashore. Washed ashore means taken to the shore or brought to the shore by the waves. And he was in a dying state. So an American prisoner, he was taken or brought to the shore by the waves. And you see that he was in a dying state. He was taken to the doorstep of a Japanese doctor. Here the question arises, should he save him as a doctor or hand him over to the army as a patriot? What will he do? What will he do? Let us examine. Dr. Sadao Hoki's house was built on a spot of the Japanese coast where as a little boy he had often played. Where was Dr. Sadao Hoki's house? It was built on a spot of the Japanese coast. Spot means place. So his house was by the side of or in the coastal area, the Japanese coastal area. And he used to play there when he was a small child. The low square stone house was set upon rocks well above a narrow beach that was outlined with bent pines. The low square stone house. His house was made up of square stones that had a low height. The house had a low height and which was set upon rocks, yes, well above narrow beach. Just above the narrow beach, at a low height, the house was made up of, yes, stones. That was outlined with the bent pines. You see that the beach had been outlined with bent pine trees. That means the beach had a boundary line of bent pine trees. As a boy, Sadao had climbed the pines, supporting himself on his bare feet, as he had seen men do in the South Seas when they climbed for coconuts. When he went to South Seas, he had seen that the people there used to climb on the coconut trees, the bent coconut trees. Same way, as a child, he used to climb on these pine trees with his naked feet. His father had taken him often to the islands of those seas. You see, his father. More often, he used to take his child, that is Sadao, to southwest seas. And never had he failed to say to the little brave boy at his side. So always keeping by the side of him, holding him very close to him, he used to tell to his son, what did he say? Those islands yonder, you look there, those islands there, they are the stepping stones to the future for Japan. He used to tell those islands there that you can see, they are the stepping stones to the future for Japan. Where shall we step from them? Sadao had asked seriously. A small child, very innocent child, without knowing the meaning of his words, he used to ask very seriously, where shall we step from them? Where shall we reach from those islands? Yes, where shall we reach from those islands? He asked this question. Who knows? Father replied. Who can limit our future? Who can decide our future? Who can limit our future? So the future had no limits, Father said. It depends on what we make it. It depends on how do we shape it. How do we form it. That means the future is in our hand. We decide what to do with it, where to reach, how to form it. Sadhu had taken this into his mind as he did everything his father said. You see that? Sadhu was such an obedient child. He had taken everything to his mind. He had taken everything seriously. That means all the words of father had been taken seriously by Sadhu. And his father, who never joked or played with him, but who spent infinite pains upon him, who was his only son. You see, Sadhu was his only son. But his father, you see that his father who never joked or played with him. That means he was a very serious man. He never played with him or joked with him. But he had taken great pain to bring up his child. So he had taken infinite pains, unlimited. Infinite means unlimited. That means he had great hardships. He had great troubles in bringing up his only son, Sadhu. Sadhu knew that his education was his father's chief concern. So Sadhu understood the hardships of his father. And he understood very well that this is my father's concern. He understood that his father's concern was his education. So Sadhu knew that his education was his father's chief concern, chief worry. For this reason, he had been sent at 22 to America to learn all that could be learned of surgery and medicine. So for this purpose, his father sent him to America at the age of 22 in order to learn medicine as well as surgery. So he had gone to America at the age of 22 to learn surgery and medicine. He had come back at 30. So after completing his education, after 8 years, that means at the age of 30, he came back to Japan. And before his father died, he had seen Sadhu became famous not only as a surgeon but as a scientist. But before the death of his father, he was fortunate enough to see his son had grown as a doctor as well as a scientist. So he was lucky enough to see the growth of his son. Because he was perfecting a discovery which would render wounds entirely clean. You see that Sadhu was not only a doctor, he was a scientist too. Why? Because he was perfecting a discovery. He was doing an experiment. For what? Which would render wounds entirely clean. That would render means make the wounds entirely clean. He was making a discovery that would make the wounds completely clean. He had not been sent abroad with the troops. But Sadhu, you see that he had not been sent abroad. Abroad means foreign countries with the troops. When the army was sent to the troops, along with the army, all the majority of the doctors in Japan were sent to the war front. But Sadhu was kept at his home country. Why? Also, he knew there was some slight danger that the old general might need an operation for a condition for which he was now being treated medically. And for this possibility, Sadhu was being kept in Japan. The reason was this. The army general, the old army general, he was sick. And you see that he was undergoing a treatment. And there was a possibility for an operation, an urgent operation at He may be in need of an urgent operation any time. So, famous surgeon Sado was kept back in the country without sending him to the war front. So, an emergency comes or an emergency situation occurs, an operation must be done, and for that they were in need of Sadowa's service. So he was kept back or kept in Japan. Clouds were rising from the ocean now. Now you see that. Clouds were rising from the ocean. The unexpected warmth of the past few days had a night drawn heavy fog from the cold waves. And as the days were very warm and the sea waves were cold, as a result of that, what happened? The nights became foggy. And Dr. Sado watched the mist hide outlines of a little island near the shore and then come creeping up the beach below the house, wreathing around the pines. Doctor noticed them. He saw that the boundary of a nearby island became invisible. Why? Because the island was covered by the mist. And gradually, he saw that gradually it got covered, the whole island, and slowly it was approaching, yes, the pines, the pine trees, wreathing around the pines. The wreathing around means covering the pine trees. In a few minutes, fog would be wrapped about the house too. Doctor understood. He was watching the island. He understood that in a few minutes, his house also would be covered with the mist. Then he would go into the room where Hannah, his wife, would be waiting for him with the two children. So by the time, what he will do? He thought he would go inside the house because his wife, Hannah, would be waiting for him, yes, with her, yes, with his two children. But at this moment, the door opened and she looked out. He was thinking to move inside. That time, immediately the door opened. His wife, Hannah, came out and she looked out. A dark blue woolen halo over her kimono. And what type of dress she was wearing? She was wearing a traditional Japanese dress, that is kimono. This is a Japanese traditional dress. So she was wearing a dark blue woolen haori. Haori, that is a loose outer garment worn over the kimono. So she was wearing a haori over the traditional dress, that is kimono. She came to him affectionately. So very lovingly, she came near to the doctor and put her arm through his as he stood. Then she put her arm through the arm of Dr. Sadova and stood there, smiled and said nothing. She didn't utter even a word. She just smiled. He had met Hannah in America, but he had waited to fall in love with her until he was sure she was Japanese. So where did they meet each other? Doctor met Hannah in America, but immediately he did not fall in love with her. He waited until he made it sure that she was also a Japanese. Why? Because his father would never have received her unless he had been pure in her race. Because his father belongs to an Orthodox family and he could not believe, he would not accept a girl from any other race. So his father would never be received her unless she had been pure in her race. Unless a girl is not pure in her race, that means if a girl is not a Japanese girl, Sadova's father would not accept, her. So Sadova knew it very well. So he waited until he knew that she was from Japan. He wondered often whom he would have married if he had not met Hannah. Often Sadova thought about this. Whom he would have married if he had not met Hannah. And by what luck he had found her in the most casual way. You see that their meeting that happened in a casual way, that happened accidentally, or we can say in an informal way. And by what luck he had found, he always thought that he was lucky enough that he could find her in the most informal way. By chance, literally, it happened accidentally. Where it happened? Where did they meet each other? At an American professor's house. Both of them met by accidentally, according to Sadova, luckily, fortunately, in the house of an American professor. The professor and his wife had been kind people. You see that both of them, professor as well as his wife, were very kind, especially to the students, foreign students, anxious to do something for their few foreign students. They were always eager to do something for their foreign students. Though bored students, you see that, even though they were bored, had accepted this kindness. Going to the professor's house, that was really boring for them. Even then, thinking about their kind-heartedness, they accepted, yes, the invitation. Sadov had often told Hannah how nearly he had not gone to Professor Hardy's house that night. Sadova often told to Hannah it was a coincidence. He was not ready to go to the house of a professor when he was invited on a particular night. Why? The rooms were so small, the food so bad, the professor's wife was so valuable. And he was not ready to go there. Why? Because the rooms were so small, as well as the food was not tasty, and the professor's wife was so talkative. So he did not like to go to that house. But he had gone there, and fortunately he found Hannah. And that night he went there, and that happened for their meeting. A new student. Hannah was a new student and had felt he would love her if it were at all possible. Then doctor decided he decided that he would love the girl at any cost. Now he felt her hand on his arm and was aware of the pleasure it gave him. Now he felt the hand, yes, on his hand, and he was really feeling happy for that. The vicinity of his wife always gave him happiness. Even though they had been married years enough to have the two children. They have two children and married many years before. Even then, the presence of his wife gave immense happiness to him. For they had not married heedlessly in America, because they had not married heedlessly, carelessly in America. They had finished their work at school and had come home to Japan. Once they completed their education there in America, they came back to Japan, and when his father had seen her, the marriage had been arranged in the old Japanese way. You see that? The marriage had been arranged following all the traditions and the custom. Although Sadhu and Hannah had talked everything over beforehand, but both of them had talked everything in advance, even before the marriage. They were perfectly happy. You see that? Both of them were perfectly happy. They were leading a happy life. She laid her cheek against his arm. Now, she laid her cheek against the arm of Sadhu. Dear students, let me wind up today's class here. So please, like and subscribe my channel. Thank you very much.